Hello, welcome to the fourth webinar on our Community Electric Bike program. I'm Cynthia Yusuf, Communications Associate with Fourth, and I will be moderating this webinar. If you could please submit any questions through the attendee chat, and we will answer them at the end of this webinar. Today, we will be joined by our program manager, Sergio Lopez, and he will give an in-depth look at our recently published Community Bike project. You can find the full report on our website at fourthmobility.org, and we will also send out the presentation and have a copy of the report as well attached to the email. And without further ado, I am going to direct it to Sergio.
Hello, everybody. Good late morning. It's 10 a.m., depending on what time I started today. Thank you for making the time and checking into the webinar. Today, we're going to go over our e-bike project that we did about a year ago. We wrapped up the case study a few months ago, so now we're kind of in transition of getting the word out about what we did, what it meant for the community, what it meant for the industry itself and for us. So I'm going to start off with, so my name is Sergio Lopez, Program Manager here at Fourth, and transforming active transportation through electrification is essentially the name what we named the e-bike project. Well, in all, it's the Community Electric Bicycle Program. So I'm going to start off with more about who we are at Fourth. I'm pretty sure a lot of us are familiar with what we are, what we do, but it's important to kind of start with the premise. So we're a nonprofit 501c6c3. Our basic mission is to transform the way we transportate, whether it's through innovation, demonstration, policy advocacy, community engagement. We kind of just want to advance the way we get around, and that's through electric transportation, whether it's sustainable, economically friendly, environmentally impactful, a lot of benefits to why this industry should exist and all. We're funded by grants, member companies. Our big conference roadmap, which, by the way, if you're not aware of, is each June. We're happy to give you more information about that if you're interested in attending, or if your company is interested in any sort of sponsorships or involvement. We're here. So a lot of companies, 130 companies, utilities, including PGE, Pacific Corp, local governments, the county, city of Portland, et cetera, you name it. Our main thing is kind of to bring different circles together and create the work. So a little bit of premise for the Community e-bike project. So when I say CEB, it's kind of the acronym for Community e-bike. So if I keep saying CEB and you're a little confused as to why, what that means, it's CEB, Community e-bike. So the Community Electric Vehicle, which is CEV project, was kind of the premise of how CEB began. A little bit background about the CEV. I won't dig too much into this project, but I do want to have a background on what it means, and it had a big effect on why CEB came to fruition. The CEV project was another demonstration project that we did with Hacienda CDC, Pacific Corp, Blink Charging, and where we donated 3 used Honda Fit electric vehicles to affordable low-income housing. So the residents in specifically Northeast Portland, the Coy neighborhood, could have access to affordable and clean transportation. Out there in the Coy neighborhood, there's only, I believe, 2 bus lines running, and they come very infrequent. So kind of the main goal there was to provide a different mode of transportation. And I think with that, it was also kind of more education about what EVs are. And I think with this picture, it kind of has a really good outline of, there's a lot of youth there, there's a lot of kids, so it's also good education itself for the up-and-coming people in the community. This is a picture of one of the first families that installed the vehicles. So with the local partners up top, down low. And I think the main thing of this project was that we learned in development was that we learned that a lot of people in that community were not going to be able to attain access to the vehicles given documentation. So whether it was affordability being a huge one, or lack of documentation, and by that I mean lack of driver's license, they couldn't access the vehicles. So it definitely was kind of a weird, ironic mission where we wanted to allow people to have different ways of getting around, but they couldn't for legal reasons. So with that, we kind of started scoping out different ways of getting around rather than just driving, which is why I think the rebrand from Drive Oregon to Fourth came about, because we wanted to focus more on just driving four-wheeled vehicles, which is cars, but also e-bikes. So the Community e-bike project was kind of the foundation of that. E-bikes are not regulated enough to have an attained driver's license. They are obviously not affordable, but they are more affordable than vehicles, and some will say that they are equivalent to a used vehicle. This is a picture of one of the cohorts, third cohort, which I'll get to more specifically in a little bit. But we, sorry, there's some noise up top and it kind of distracted my train of thought. But this was, so this right here is Living Coley Plaza, which recently just got demolished and will be more low-income housing through asking the CDC, which will be called Las Adelitas. And that construction should begin sometime later this year. So the Community E-Bike Project was in partnership with the Community Cycling Center, Gen Z, where Community Cycling Center was basically the local CBO helping and deliver and kind of run the logistics of the program, working with the community since they have had a huge role in the city of Portland in general and have been an amazing partner, and as well as Gen Z providing the physical loan of the e-bikes, which are great bikes. If you are interested personally in getting an e-bike, Gen Z is probably one of the best first bikes to get acquainted with. They're very simple, very generic. They get the point across. And then from that point on, if you wanted to get something a little more expensive or top-notch, high-tech, go forth, as they say. But it was a good bike to have in this project. So the main goal for this program was to basically test how e-bikes could benefit people in reserve communities, how they can help diversify the transportation options, not just vehicles. And as I mentioned earlier, documentation was a big thing. Back in I believe it was 14, Measure 88 denied Oregon undocumented residents to not attain driver's license. So it's trying to find loopholes around the policy and the physical legality of that. So in hindsight, macro project timeline of this program. So January of 17, we kind of established the partners, got in contact with the Community Cycling Center, and Steve spoke in Gen Z, and kind of began that work forward to kind of get it going. In March 2017, we launched the first cohort, which was basically in partnership with local internal affiliates of the CCC, which is the Community Cycling Center. June of 2017 was a second cohort with PCC affiliated staff and faculty, and then September of 2017 was the ABC, and then we wrapped up, I believe, Thanksgiving week. I remember because it was a 3-day week and we had 3 days to attain all the e-bikes, and I knew it was an ambitious goal, but it worked out, and we had 3 days to do it, and we got all the bikes and all the gear, and at that time we wanted to deliver the bikes back to Gen Z and get all the stuff back to the Community Cycling Center in terms of logistics. So the design and more into logistics, this kind of covers the same ones before, but to be more specific, the March to June, July, to September were basically 3 cohorts of 10 participants, and they lasted about 10 weeks each. So basically, the important thing of this project wasn't just bike share, where like you go rent a bike where you want and go drop it off where you want, which is really, really awesome. I think one of the big impacts of this project was that each individual had their own bike individually as their own thing, and I think that was special. And I think, and then with that, we acquainted every individual with commute-ready amenities. So helmets, bike lights, a water bottle, reflective gear, most importantly, a pannier. And we tried doing our best to keeping all this locally commercial. So we helped the CCC and we purchased about 80% of the stuff from their shop. And then the panniers we got from North Street, which is a local vendor here. So we tried keeping that within the community as well. And the main goal was to have, whether an individual was an avid bike commuter or not, we wanted them to feel safe and be ready. And go to the next slide real quick. And this was the beginning. This was in, I believe, February, March 2017, where Ira Dixon, program manager at the time at the Community Cycling Center, did an orientation for the first 2 cohorts. Myself did the third cohort with ABC in Coley neighborhood. And this is kind of what the bikes look like. Those are the panniers, the locks, the cable locks, the keys. Basically how it worked is we went in there. It was a street etiquette 101 on basically when you're on the road with a bike, e-bike, specifically an e-bike, you use your left turn your turn signals, your right turn signals, your stop signs, just basic bike etiquette. And then most importantly, how to use the e-bikes, of course, and how to lock the bike with the frame, with the tire, how to take the battery out, how to charge the battery, how long does it take to charge the battery, all the stuff they needed to know to kind of get out there. And as Ira once said in one of the presentations, it was very memorable. He said, as soon as you open that garage door, they all kind of flow away like doves, and that's kind of what happened. At that point, once the orientation was over, everyone just kind of did their own thing and used it for their own purposes, whether it was going to school, going to work, hanging out with friends, whatever it was. It was basically to see how these e-bikes were going to adapt into their daily lifestyle. So cohort number 2, so the first one was, like I said, it was with internal participants of the Community Cycling Center. The second one kind of, through doing the outreach that the CCC did, it kind of came clear that a lot of them were PCC-related folks, whether they were students, faculty, et cetera. It kind of became obvious after a certain while of doing the outreach and doing the recruitment, was if you see here, PCCs have campuses all over Portland, and each campus offers different classes, different departments of education. So I myself was a CCC, not for Portland, but in another community college student where I knew that I had to go to different campuses for different tools, for different workshops, different labs. And for example, you want to go to, North Cascade campus, but you also want to go to the Southeast on Division. If you don't have a car, if you're a student, this e-bike was basically a good way to kind of test out how to get those campuses on time and how to get to work. I know the Southwest one is over the hill, and that's, I think, one of the most well-attended ones as well. So it was good to have individuals who had to basically go across town for their bread and butter, which is whether it's school or work. And that's where the second cohort kind of relied on. And the second cohort was the most utilized, most active cohort, precisely just because of the weather. It was started in June, and it was 90 degrees mainly every day. As everyone knows, the summers here are getting sunnier and warmer. So we got a lot of use out of that cohort. And in that cohort, we did have a bike stolen, which is important to note. The bike stolen was out on 122nd Avenue, I believe, left overnight at a train station. But the bike was only locked to the tire, I believe. We didn't obtain the bike, but I think in all of the miles that we had ridden and the 28 individual participants that were involved, I think one stolen bike was a good number. We expected to have harder scenarios and more kind of scary scenarios. So those are inevitable things that you kind of put on the table when you have a bike share program in a public space. So the third cohort was kind of outlined back to what the CEV project meant, and that was in Coley. Obviously probably the most diverse area in Oregon. 43% of residents are renters, 85% qualify for free reduced lunch. Limited transportation options. I believe there's only 2 lines that run out there right now. And just to rail lines and industrial yards, and not many. I know Coley now is a greenway, but once you get more towards the airport, it does lack sidewalks. And I will say that on the street up 67th and Killingsworth up in Coley, it's equivalent to a football field. It's like 100 yards wide. Cars in the street isn't the easiest thing to do. So we wanted to make this the last cohort because we wanted to have more experience with the previous 2 cohorts to kind of have more of an impact to see how they would actually use the bikes. And the third cohort was specifically more towards ABC, which is ABC, which translates into Andando en Bicicletas en Coley, which is riding bikes in Coley. They're a local community group. Most of them live in the CDC, if not in the neighborhood of Coley, and kind of just advocate for community engagement with active transportation, whether it's walking or biking, and that's in partnership and in sponsorship through the Community Cycling Center. So some of the main outcomes that we'll go over here is, so we had 28 participants total. I think the last cohort we only had 8 people participate. 2, 3 of them did show apprehensive into the speed and being liable, so they decided not to partake, which is okay. But we had 3 surveys submitted anonymously. The first one being kind of pre-survey, kind of questions like this, like what is your age range, to kind of get a consensus of what our crowd was like. Second being more mid-surveys, and the post-survey being the outcomes, like what did you think of the bikes, or how many miles did you ride, or et cetera. And also just kind of get demographics, transportation usage. And we had an estimate of 3,997 miles traveled. With the bike stolen, safe to say that bike stolen had 3 miles on it, so we can say 4,000. But that bike that was stolen did have a lot of ride usage, so the 4,000 mark is a safe option. So for March to November, we had over 4,000 miles ridden, which is pretty impressive, which I want to say is cross country maybe. Not 100% sure, but some of the questions that highlighted in the first survey. So what's your gender? We had about a little over 50% being male, one person of non-binary, and then about 40% female. And then some other questions that were more internal and I think had an impact on what the project meant was we really wanted to know what people were using prior to having an e-bike as an option, their own e-bike more specifically. And so we have bike, we have transit, we have carpool, we have car, and we have walk. So bike and transit being the biggest ones and walking being the biggest ones. And I know car is on here, and I think this is important because a lot of these people didn't have driver's license. We didn't ask, but we made it clear that we want people that don't have driver's license. For whatever reason, that's none of our business, but we want to have an impact on people that need transportation options. And I think the car insight here is kind of just raw perspective on some people do drive without a license because that's their only option. Some people will buy a clunker for $2,000 and just drive it because that's their only option. And I think that's important to highlight that in these communities, these things are needed, and that these e-bikes are not just fancy toys. It's like, no, let's see how this can apply to your daily life, and let's try to make things work here a different way. And the question 7 was, do you own your own bicycle? And 7% did, 30% didn't. And I think in an anecdote purpose, we had one individual from the second cohort get a job promotion because his regular use of transportation was a regular bike. And I think with an e-bike, he was able to get there quicker, get there unpropped, obviously showed better work ethic at the end of the day, and picked up more shifts because he was able to get there quicker to the point where he got a job promotion. So obviously transportation had a huge impact on what his work meant to him. And then how often do you ride a bike? So this is kind of just in general. Daily being 1/4 of the people, 2 to 4 times a week, and then a month. I think, so myself being a bike commuter, I don't ride my bike every day, but I ride it probably 2 to 4 times a week, so that is the most common one. And that's kind of relates back to the previous one, just to know what the main usage of transportation is for the individuals. Some of the basic barriers. So durability was a big one in the second cohort, more specifically. And these were all inputted into the surveys. So some of the folks did say that they could have been sturdier. For example, they could have had thicker tires. And one participant did say that the fender got loose after they rid through a shallow pothole. So these were all Gen Z's 101s. E101s. Gen Z now has 202s, which are definitely more sturdier, definitely have a more foundation of durability. And I think that was actually really good to point out in the case study, because with these barriers, there was a resolution and there was an outcome. And as I said previously in the presentation earlier, was that these bikes are good start bikes for being e-bikes. So people weren't like talking 100% negativity on these bikes. It was good constructive criticism, basically. And then the weather was a big one. So the first and third cohort being March of 2017 and then September of 2017, these kind of did overlap a bit of the rain, whether it was spring or fall rain. A lot of the people were not avid bike riders. They were a little apprehensive in riding in the rain and the wind, so they just hopped on the bus and they didn't feel safe. I'm not going to lie, this morning I was a little hesitant riding in the wind. It was cold last night, and so I think that's just the natural purpose of being on a bike. And although we did equip them with rain-proof panniers and reflective gear and helmets, obviously we couldn't get rain gear. Rain gear is expensive, and we couldn't fit that into the budget. And we tried our best to start it from March to November without getting into the winter, January months, because those are the rainiest months. So with that being said, it's the reason why the second cohort did succeed so well was because it was just sunny the entire time, and they probably only had a few days of rain. And And then so what's next? So I think it's important to ask this question. It's like, what's the meaning of all this? Like, why are we doing this? And I think the best way to kind of go about it is, like, what are the best ways to introduce new transportation technology into diverse communities? And this is kind of it. And this is what kind of Fourth is trying to do. This is what we're trying to shoot for, and working with communities and organizations like the Community Cycling Center and companies like Gen Z is basically we want to run these demonstration projects not only as education, as outreach, but kind of just to, in a way, like have a ethnography perspective on what works and what doesn't, and how is it going to work. For example, if these e-scooters come back, we're going to have data, they're going to have data to learn how it runs. The reason why Peabot wanted to propose a 4-month pilot project to these scooters is to not just throw them in there and assume that it's going to work, but to have an impactful way of going about the work and having people use the technology. And I think in these scenarios where legality is not always a way, it's important to kind of go in and have a way and find a way. And in the bottom, I have basic pros and cons to e-bikes. Faster commute times, easier to ride, cost-effective, eco-friendly, etc. Cons: too heavy, maybe too flashy. The battery was kind of a pain in the butt to charge. And I want to be healthy. I want to ride my bike. I want my cardio, etc. But with this question, I do want to, I know we have a lot of, going 20 minutes in, and we have more time later to go into discussion and conversation and questions, but I want to end it with a quote that kind of highlights what we're doing here with these kind of projects. And it's from Aviona Elugo. She is considers herself a bicycle anthropologist, local Reed graduate, and has her master's and her doctorates in anthropology from Long Beach. And the approach to changing street culture takes a step back from designing new street systems and focuses instead on the human infrastructure that shapes our current mobility. And I think one of the big things with this project was working around physical infrastructure and working around physical policy, and that was the lack of driver's licenses. And I think it takes community, it takes partnerships, and it takes these kind of projects to kind of build the human infrastructure. I think with human infrastructure is a big term, and I think it relates more towards social infrastructure, and that relies on diversity, equity, inclusion, is the building a community, building work, and kind of pushing that forward to take people like us in the industry to make that happen, when the physicality of it is not always going to dictate it. Things have been built in the U.S. for over a century now, where the physical infrastructure is the way it is, where on the corner of 67th and Coley is like a football field. Like, we can't work around that, so what can we do to make that work? And I think, take what you want from this quote, but I thought, when I read this book, I thought it was really on point into what we're trying to do. Obviously, keeps the motivation to flow, and I do want to end it with that. And I'm happy to answer any questions at this point. If you want to go the attendee chat and type in the question or comments, concerns, etc., feel free. The next slide here is a basic collateral that we have that can be found on our website at fourthmobility.org. Kind of more financial ways and the benefits of it, like parking, for example, how many kilowatts takes, etc. Help us up to that, and we're happy to email you any more information. My email is sergio.l@fourthmobility.org. Reach out to Cindy as well if you guys want the actual data or more specific information. We're happy, and we're online for another 30 minutes, so please feel free to submit questions on the attendee chat. And thank you for tuning in on a busy week. Yes, we do. We do. So we have a few more photos with actually the community that I can definitely forward you. In this presentation, I only have a few. We have more in the actual case study, but I can actually send you the actual files if that's helpful. I'll repeat the question. So do you have photos that are available that we can use to show constituents? And the answer is yes, we do. If actually, I'll write my email here because I realized it's only at the beginning of the slides. Oh, there you go. Yeah, so feel free to email me, and I can send you more photos of the actual project and the participants and out in the field. And I think we have a couple of videos as well, actually. That is a great question. So what do you estimate is cost for 10 bikes if you can get them donated? So each bike costs about $1,500. So it's the $1,500 on that with the 10 bikes, it's a little over, let's say, close to about 15 or so. And Steve spoke, which I believe is in this presentation. A huge shout out to him. Donated the bikes. When we returned those bikes, he put them on a holiday sale, which at that time you can find them on sale for like $500. And I think they're also, you can get those on I think it was Costco online, more macro vendors. David Reek asked, will this be a presentation in your annual conference? And it won't, unfortunately. I think at this time we'll have other presentations that are hopefully more current. But if we can find a spot, we will. Tegan asked, what have people done for transit since they completed the program? That's a good question. We at Fourth are itself looking to get back out there. I know Hacienda CDC, the CDC, has initiated a program with Las Adelitas, which they will be offering kind of a more transportation wallet for the community members in low-income housing, which includes shuttle, e-bikes, e-scooters is the hope. So there is more work being done, and Fourth is doing its best to get out there and be a part of that as well. So were there any discussion about so Josh Channel asked, was there any discussion about the e-bike speed and how the riders, particularly the less experienced ones, felt in bicycle lanes and in general traffic? Do you have a sense that they found these were more or less comfortable than the models that they were previously using? That's actually a really good question, and that actually became to be one of the barriers of safety, was that a couple of people said they were just too fast and they were scared. The pro was that you got there quicker and you spent less time in the rain, etc. The con was that you just didn't feel safe, and when you use the throttle, which these bikes had, being class 2 e-bikes, meaning you have assist or throttle, when they would hit the throttle, they just felt like it was like a moped. But then you had other users that they were all about the throttle. They wanted to use the throttle, and they wanted to pop their wheelies with the throttle because it was easier, for example, which obviously falls under safety. But yeah, the less experienced ones, I think the two that pushed the bikes away at their cohort that I referenced to were because they thought they were too fast. They were just too extreme, I guess is the word. Good question. And I realize that the questions that are coming in are only through internal, so if you guys want to repeat them, please let me know.
If there are no more questions, I would like to say thank you to Sergio for joining us, and thank you guys for joining us today. We have our next webinar coming up on February 12th. We'll be discussing equity in transportation electrification. We'll be joined by our Executive Director, Jeff Allen, and guest speaker, Joe Espino from the Green Lining Institute, and they will discuss equity and transportation electrification. And again, thank you all for joining us. Shoot Sergio any questions, or you can shoot me any questions, or you can shoot us any questions at info@fourthmobility.org. And you can visit our website, fourthmobility.org, to get any information about the project, read the full report, or read our blog on that, and there will be an email sent out after this as well. And I'm going to leave it for one more minute if anyone has any question. If not, again, you can do the slide at slideshare.com/fourth. Thank you.